Hi everyone, and welcome back to Healing Gems. I hope you're okay. So today I am going to talk to you about how do you actually get chronic fatigue. So this is a big question and there isn't really a simple answer. And everybody's journey, is worth saying, into chronic fatigue will be completely different. Like my journey into chronic fatigue will be different to yours. Your journey will be different to the other people that watch this video. So what I always try to sort of reinforce to people is you do have to remember, none of this is your fault. So, we've had this journey into chronic fatigue just through basically, living life, events happening in our lives. And unfortunately, our body's way of coping or the disposition we may have, unfortunately, ends up in chronic fatigue. So other people might have a predisposition to other illnesses, such as cancer, diabetes, whatever the illness is. People's bodies always have some sort of weakness or predisposition to something, and generally, people like us, our disposition has been in the nervous system. So how do we get to the point of getting chronic fatigue then? So it generally isn't like an overnight thing. You wake up one day and you have chronic fatigue, even though it may have felt like that. I remember my journey, it started with one day my legs just felt like they were going to collapse from beneath me. And it almost did feel like I literally woke up and got chronic fatigue. But that wasn't the case. So our bodies and our autonomic nervous system, we are, in a healthy individual, are able to regulate ourselves. We're able to sort of maintain this homeostasis level of wellness in our body while dealing with the sort of stresses of life. So what happens generally is, in life, maybe, you go to work, you have an argument with your boss, you go into, fight or flight. In your nervous system, you very wound up, you get very angry or you get very upset. But then your body is able to come back into this neutral, balanced nervous system. And this is how healthy individuals go through life. Something happens, they go into either the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, and then back into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. And, you go through life and every day in and out of these two different parts of the autonomic nervous system. But say as life goes on, there are things that happen to us which accumulate stress in the body. And again, this is different for everyone depending on what you find stressful. So events that can happen are things like even, starting a new job, it's stressful. Maybe there's, you've got a bad boss at work. This is stressful. Bullying that happens in your life. These are very stressful and traumatic things. It might be that you have an illness, maybe you do have something like, an infection or shingles, glandular fever, COVID. This is another sort of stressor on your physical body. Then there are stressors, good stressors that, getting married, having a baby. These are, really nice things that we want to do in life, but they are very stressful. Moving house. Again, you're getting your own place, maybe moving in with someone. It's all very exciting, but it is a stress on the body, and it does create this, it takes you out of this this homeostasis, which we sort of, the body tries to maintain. So you keep getting these stresses happening in the body. It might be a death of a family member or a friend, which is obviously very traumatic. And then there are things like diet. If you're eating high sugar, lots of sort of like refined carbs, drinking maybe lots of alcohol, fizzy drinks. You know, these obviously take a lot of processing in the body, and cause the body a lot of stress in order to try and digest them. So that causes like stress within the body. And chronic exercise, this was a massive one for me. I loved exercise, you know, did it far too much, without maybe looking after myself in other areas. This puts a massive stress on the body. So you get all of these, maybe sometimes mini stressors, bigger stressors that happen, and they just keep accumulating and accumulating. And what people don't realize is that stress gets stored in the body. If you don't know how to process stress, you know, through maybe meditation or through counseling, talking therapy, or maybe through like exercise in the right amount, it starts to get trapped and stored in the body. And then it takes less and less and less for your body to cope with even the smallest of stresses. So this is building up, and eventually you hit this sort of tipping point where you go beyond your body and your mind being able to cope with all these stresses. And this is when you get like a dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. And once you have sort of like gone over into this dysregulation state, it is very, very hard to get back. And this is why like these kinds of conditions like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, POTS, etc., are very hard to heal, because even the smallest of stressors, when you're in that massive stress zone, even the smallest of stressors like skipping a meal or not getting enough sleep, or someone, you know, having a little argument with your spouse, that can knock you sideways. Whereas in a healthy person, it probably wouldn't really tip the scale very much. So so looking at all this, like say for me, for my journey, I would say I've always probably had a predisposition to anxiety anyway, you know, as far back as I can remember. Was like quite an anxious child. In my teens, I suffered with anorexia. And then in my 20s, I developed OCD quite badly. So all of this going on was just like this underlying stressor in my body. And then add on to that, you know, I was trying to build a career, so I was working really hard. I exercised a lot, pretty chronically exercised, really pushed my body, maybe not eating the right foods, not eating enough, you know, drinking too much alcohol, you know, sort of partying a bit too much and burning the candle at both ends. Then, you know, add to that, there was sort of like several deaths in my family that happened in sort of like a short space of time. A big relationship breakup, which was really difficult to go through. And then following that, several other sort of like relationships that maybe didn't work out, and had sort of complications within them. All of this was just like building and building stress. And I did start to notice that, you know, I was getting sort of a bit weird, sort of maybe symptoms happening, maybe I felt like I had an infection in my ears. I had like chronic ulcers that would last for months. And then I had like antibiotics that, you know, one after the other, like to try and get rid of like these like ulcers in my body. And all of this just started to deplete like my system. And then it got to kind of the stage where, you know, I could sort of like hit my hand on a surface and it would feel like it was a lot of pain for a small, you know, for a small hit to the hand. You know, it didn't make sense that, you know, that would cause that amount of sort of pain to my body. And then what happens usually for people, there is like a big thing, or maybe it isn't a big thing, that happens, that you almost like put the blame on for chronic fatigue. So for example, mine was running a half marathon. You know, I knew that I probably shouldn't be doing it. I was really struggling with the training. It was hard work. I was depleting my body. I wasn't resting enough. I really wasn't eating the right diet for training as hard as I was. You know, I didn't give up on, like, you know, going out or working hard. You know, I tried to do it all. And that was the final tipping point for me. Whereas other people, it might be like an infection, like glandular fever, or it might be COVID that tips you over, and then, you know, you end up with chronic fatigue, long COVID, fibromyalgia. You know, it depends on how it gets sort of expressed in your body. So you can see that, you know, everyone's journey into chronic fatigue is going to be different. And I think this is why, you know, some treatments work for some people and don't work for others, because you've had such different journeys and different reasons why you ended up in almost the same place, that, you know, the treatment is going to be different. So I hope that helps, like, explain a little bit more about how, you know, chronic fatigue develops in the body. I think it's good to have an understanding of, you know, how this happens in order for you to be able to get well. You know, it's just that, you know, your body is completely depleted. Your body is almost like, you know, it's just saying, I've had enough, like, you know, it's going to stop for you because you weren't listening to things that, you know, that your body was trying to tell you beforehand. So again, don't blame yourself though. You know, you're just trying to do life the best way that you know how. And as I said, you probably do have some sort of predisposition. For example, like, a lot of people that get chronic fatigue are highly sensitive people. So our nervous systems are maybe like on a higher sort of like more highly elevated levels anyway. So it doesn't take as much for you to tip the balance as opposed to someone who maybe isn't a highly sensitive person. So as I say, you know, never blame yourself. Like, you know, you are where you are. Many people have recovered from this, and, you know, you can start to heal yourself. You can make things a lot better for yourself by starting to put things into action and learning more about the condition. And that's what I try and hope to do on this channel, is to give you, you know, advice and ideas of what you can do in order to help heal yourself. Okay, so if you found this helpful, give me a thumbs up, please subscribe, please pass this along to anyone who is suffering from anything like, you know, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, POTS, multiple chemical syndrome, because they're all sort of the same expression of the same illness. So once again, thank you for listening. And if you've got any comments, please put them below. I always do answer. Thanks very much and take care.